I keep a private log of our family road trips in the Notes app on my phone. Miles driven, gas stops, the occasional rant about construction. The entry for March 18, 2014 runs much longer than the rest. It turned into a confession I never meant to write. I'm setting it down here so I can finally delete the original and maybe sleep. We left Louisville before sunrise, heading east on I-64 toward Portsmouth, Ohio. Anna's sister had just had a baby. Our 10-year-old Mason slumped in the backseat under a blanket, earbuds in, oblivious to the redbud trees blushing along the highway. By noon, a spring storm rolled out of the hills. The sky went to wet steel, and needles of rain hammered the windshield. I watched the outside temperature plummet from 60 to 39 in under an hour. Just past Huntington, West Virginia, the Camry developed a steady thump in the front left tire, belt separating. I'd learn later. At a service station, an attendant warned that the nearest major hotel was 30 miles beyond a ridge that iced over and sometimes closed. He pointed instead to a frontage road paralleling old US 60. There's the Metallark Motor Lodge about 4 miles east, he said. Cash is better, never full this time of year. Dusk was falling when we saw the hand-painted sign, a wooden Metallark with chipped yellow wings nailed to a post beside a sagging cinder block office. The lodge was a single horseshoe of rooms around a cracked asphalt court. Each door was sea-foam green, numbers stenciled in black. A flickering sodium lamp washed the lot, picking out a rusted Pepsi machine and a half-buried plastic tricycle. Inside the office, we met Mr. and Mrs. Bowden, a mirror image couple in their 70s. She managed the guest book. He dragged a space heater closer to the desk and apologized for the chill. $52 got us room 12 at the far end by the laundry shed. Mrs. Bowden slid a brass key across the counter and warned that the heater would rattle like a freight car for a while. The room was preserved in 1971. Orange swirl carpet, balsa wood dresser, a floral bedspread even a thrift store might reject. But the sheets looked clean and the bathroom smelled faintly of bleach. Mason claimed the bed by the window and flipped on the TV to drown the wind. I unfolded the cot for Natalie, our 7-year-old, who had already started a flashlight tag game with her brother, pale circles skittering across the ceiling tiles. We ate sandwiches from the cooler, tucked the kids in, and switched off the lights. The heater clanked and shook. Somewhere behind it, water dripped in slow, patient ticks. I lay awake, doing math on the spare tire and the 100 miles we still had to cover in the morning. Around 1 a.m., the storm settled into a steady drum. Water sluiced off the eaves. Tires hissed on the wet highway a quarter mile away. At 1:47, by the dull red of the travel clock, Mason whispered, "Dad." He had that guilty, halted tone kids use when they're not sure if they're about to get in trouble. "Yeah, bud," I murmured. He said he could hear someone breathing in the vent above his bed, heavy, slow, like Darth Vader but without the machine. I told him it was just wind in the ductwork. He accepted it but asked to switch beds. I traded with him, kissed his forehead, and lay down under the vent, forcing myself not to stare at it. Sleep crept back in fits. At 3:12, I jolted awake to Anna's fingers digging into my arm. In the glow of the clock, I could see her eyes wide open, pupils huge. "Listen," she mouthed. For a moment there was only the radiator's low groan. Then, faint and undeniable, a slow inhale-exhale drifted down from the ceiling vent. Human, not mechanical. The rhythm was off, with tiny throat clicks on each side. I switched on the lamp. The breathing stopped. The vent was one of those old 12 by 6 aluminum grilles, painted over a dozen times. Nothing but darkness beyond. I grabbed the ice bucket, climbed onto the bed, and pressed my ear to the slats. All I heard was the heater rattling and Anna's quick breathing. We debated waking the kids, then decided not to feed their nightmares. I unscrewed the bulb to dim the room again and lay on my back watching the ceiling. 20 minutes later, it came again. One long inhale, a pause, and a sigh moving through dusty ductwork. I sat up so fast the mattress springs squealed. Anna snapped the lamp back on. Natalie stirred on the cot. I held a hand up for silence and pointed. An eye pale, ringed with grime, peered at us from behind the vent grille. It blinked once, then disappeared into the dark. By the time Anna stopped shaking enough to pull jeans over her pajama shorts, Mason was sobbing into his pillow, begging us to drive on the bad tire instead. I dragged the dresser in front of the door and called the front desk from the room phone. No answer. I dialed 911. The dispatcher's calm questions felt like they were for someone else. Our names, the address, whether anyone was hurt. She said deputies were en route and told us to stay inside. That part was easy. 5 minutes later, sirens bounced off the hill, blue strobes sweeping our curtains. 2 Putnam County Sheriff's cruisers and a rescue truck rolled into the lot. A deputy went door to door, pounding and shouting, clearing each room. Mr. Bowden appeared in a robe, voice quivering, as he insisted only registered guests had keys to the attic hatch above the laundry shed. Deputies pried open the storage room and found a pull cord in the ceiling. An aluminum ladder unfolded into a black square. One deputy climbed while his partner held a flashlight on the opening. Anna held Mason. Natalie's hand crushed mine. From above, the deputy called down. "Copy. Looks like bedding, some food, trash. Hold on, got a subject." Boots scraped on plywood. A muttered comment about a pulse. Paramedics climbed up, then eased a man down strapped to a backboard. Early 50s, unshaven, hair matted with plaster dust. Dirty Pittsburgh Pirates hoodie, one mismatched work boot. His eyelids fluttered but never opened. As the medics worked, an evidence tech photographed the vent above our bed. Through the open register, we could see rough-cut plywood forming a crawlspace just large enough for a person to lie flat. Someone had bent the vent tabs back so it could swing like a hinge. We spent the next hour in the office while deputies crawled the attic. They photographed a stained camp mattress, crumpled Dairy Queen wrappers from 5 miles west, half-empty water bottles, and a pocket notebook full of grocery lists. One page listed dates, Mar 7, Mar 9, Mar 12, Mar 15, each beside a tic-tac-toe grid. Another in shaky letters read, "Whisper so they stay." A detective eventually sat down with us. The man, name initially withheld, later released as Raymond G. Turner, had no ID, but hospital bracelets indicated repeated ER visits in Charleston. Medics suspected dehydration and maybe a concussion from a fall between rafters. The detective figured Turner had climbed in weeks earlier through an exterior access panel near the laundry vents and had been living above whatever room stayed empty, shifting as guests came and went. Our ceiling vent once belonged to a dead central AC system, leaving an open duct into the crawlspace. Anna asked what we were both thinking. Was he dangerous? The detective's shoulders sagged. He looks like a non-violent transient, no weapons up there. My guess is he watched because he was lonely, not predatory. He'll still face trespassing and a pile of code violations. Mrs. Bowden, overhearing, burst into tears. "We never go up there," she kept repeating. Never thought, as if words could rewrite the report. I believed her. The hatch was practically camouflaged under peeling paint and stacked detergent buckets. By 5 a.m. the deputies were gone. The sky over the wooded ridge went to oyster gray. A tow truck, arranged by the rescue crew, pulled in to mount a replacement tire on the Camry, law enforcement courtesy. I ferried luggage to the car while the kids sat inside with the heater running. We could have left then, but I stood rooted on the cracked sidewalk outside room 12, turning Turner's notebook phrase over in my head. "Whisper so they stay." I wondered if the tic-tac-toe grids were nights he'd lain unseen above other families like ours. As we pulled onto Route 60, dawn leaking through skeletal sycamores, Anna squeezed my knee. She didn't have to ask what I was thinking. Before we merged back onto I-64, I detoured to the hospital off Hal Greer Boulevard in Huntington, where they'd taken Turner. Inside, an admitting nurse eyed my road-stained jacket and pointed me towards social services. In a cramped office that smelled like dry erase markers, A woman named Cries told me Turner would be held on a 72-hour psych observation at most. No long-term care unless he posed a danger. He had listed no contacts. His odds of getting housing afterward were slim to none. I pulled a weathered business card from my wallet, Haverford Packaging Solutions, Louisville. It still had a crease from the year I lived out of my pickup. I asked Cries to give Turner a note from me when he woke up, ready to help with work and housing. Call if you're willing. She hesitated over liability, then agreed. Anna didn't question the delay. She knew my history, 2 years of couch surfing, a month in a shelter, then a foreman at Haverford who ignored my lack of address and hired me on. She also knew that debts to kindness collect interest. We reached Portsmouth by noon. The kids bolted into their aunt's bungalow without a word about vents or breathing. I spent the visit checking my phone, half hoping Turner wouldn't call, half hoping he would. He did, 3 days later, late evening. His voice was raspy but clear. He thanked me for keeping them from shoving me back under a bridge. He didn't ask why I cared. I told him Haverford's warehouse always needed night shift pickers. A local mission ran transitional apartments, 6-month lease, no deposit, utilities covered for 90 days. He listened quietly and said, "I can try." That was enough. He arrived by Greyhound April 2, carrying 2 plastic bags and wearing donated khakis and a Goodwill parka. I met him outside the station. The same pale eyes that had peered through a vent now watched me with tired gratitude. His first night at the mission, he barely spoke. By the 3rd week at the warehouse, he knew every supervisor's name and refused to clock out until the last pallet was wrapped. By May, his paychecks covered rent. That summer, he saved enough for a studio on Barry Boulevard, walking distance to the plant. Mason helped carry in a used sofa and asked if vents still scared him. Turner gave a crooked half smile and said, "Fresh air's overrated." I'd like to end the story there, tidy and redemptive, but life doesn't stick to clean arcs. Turner keeps to himself, haunted by things that stare back from more than attic vents. Some nights after late shifts, he calls and just listens to me breathe between words. Long inhale, short exhale, proof someone's on the other end. I talk until his voice slows and tell him good night. After I hang up, I open my notes app and scroll to March 18. I reread the lines about broken tires and hidden crawl spaces and remind myself how thin the drywall is between safety and fear, how easily kindness can drift through old ducts like air. When the memory tightens in my chest, I picture that attic mattress tossed into a dumpster, daylight pouring through the roof seam where an eye once watched families beneath. I picture Turner now under fluorescent tubes instead of moonlight, scanning barcodes on cardboard boxes instead of faces through a grate. The image steadies me enough to sleep. On the best nights, I dream of the Metallark sign repainted, roof patched, vents sealed, every room gutted down to studs and rebuilt. I dream Mr. Bowden is still alive to hang a no vacancy banner, because every bed is booked by families who will never know the names carved there in fear. In that dream, wind still rattles above Route 60, but it never again sounds like breathing, only the harmless shuffle of wings. Before the next story, imagine the same narrator asking you silently to keep listening. Some nights, that's all any of us can do. I was driving west on I-90 on July 12, 2023, planning to clear Montana before dark, when the battery light blinked on just past Billings. I shut off the radio, counted mile markers, and prayed the alternator would limp me to Bozeman. Near the Pine Creek exit, the headlights began to pulse. The engine died on a barren stretch. I coasted to the shoulder while 18-wheelers roared past, their wake rocking my Civic. No cell signal. I popped the hood, stared at the tangle of belts, and accepted I was stuck. A highway patrol officer eventually spotted me and radioed for a tow. An hour later, a young driver named Tyler hauled me to Rusty's garage in Livingston. Rusty himself, a sunburned man in oil-stained coveralls, poked under the hood and declared the alternator dead. A replacement would have to come from Bozeman in the morning. He offered me a dog-smelling loner. I'd been driving since dawn and wanted a real bed. "There's the Big Sky Lodge 7 miles down the frontage road," Rusty said. "Cheaper than the chains in town. Cash only, but decent enough for a night." Tyler dropped me there as the sun sank behind the Absaroka Range. The sign buzzed with half-dead neon. One G flickered so it read by Sky LODE. The office was a cramped wood-paneled room that smelled of burnt coffee. A portable fan rattled in the corner. The clerk, a tired woman in her late 50s, slid a registration card toward me. She never asked for ID, just counted the 20s I laid down and handed over a metal key with a plastic tag. Room 17. The exterior corridor ran the length of the single-story building. My room sat near the far end, across from a thin line of ponderosa pines that separated the lot from a wall of dark woods. The air outside smelled of dust, pine sap, and diesel from trucks downshifting on the interstate. I lugged my suitcase inside, threw both deadbolts and closed the heavy drapes. One lamp lit the room. The carpet had a worn trail from door to bed to bathroom. The sheets looked clean. The window unit wheezed out lukewarm air. I showered, changed into a t-shirt and shorts, and sat on the bed scrolling old texts while my phone clung to a weak bar of service. Around midnight, the signal died completely. I set the phone face down, turned off the lamp, and listened to the steady hum of the AC. Highway noise blurred into white sound. Occasionally, a truck brake hissed like a giant exhale. Sleep came in thin layers. Sometime after 2 a.m., a gentle knock pulled me up from it. More of a tap than a knock. I lay still, eyes open. 3 seconds later, the tapping came again, deliberate. I padded to the door. The peephole showed only the dim corridor, washed in a single yellow bulb at the far end. No feet, no shadows. A third set of knocks, slightly louder, echoed down the walkway. My own breath thundered in my ears. I waited. Silence. I told myself it was a drunk guest at the wrong door. 5 minutes passed. I had just eased back onto the mattress when the same pattern began next door. Slow, polite taps on room 18's door. Then a soft female voice murmured something I couldn't make out. The knocking moved along the row, room to room, the same patient cadence, like someone trick or treating in a mausoleum. After about 10 minutes, the corridor fell quiet. I tried to slow my breathing. A moth thumped against the window behind the curtains. Then the sound changed. Knuckles on glass. Not the door this time. The window beside my bed. I froze. The drapes were drawn, but a narrow gap at the bottom leaked moonlight. A shadow slid across it, blotting the light out. It swayed as if the person outside shifted from one foot to the other. 3 precise taps rattled the pane. I didn't scream. I snapped upright, grabbed my phone from the nightstand, and saw the empty signal bars. Only emergency calls only glowed on the screen, and even those wouldn't connect. I jammed my feet into my shoes, grabbed my car key, useless without a car, but it felt like something solid, and eased the deadbolt back. The hallway was empty. At the far end, neon from the office sign flickered through a dirty window, painting the concrete in broken pink. I ran. My footsteps echoed. No doors opened. No one called after me. The office door was propped with a catalog. Inside, a small TV played a muted late-night show. The night clerk sat behind the counter with her feet on a stool, nose in a paperback romance. She raised one eyebrow when she saw me. "There's someone outside my window," I said. My voice shook more than I wanted. "He knocked on my door, now the glass." She lowered the book and sighed. "Cameras have been glitchy all week," she said. "I can call the sheriff, but by the time they get here, please," I said. She picked up the landline, dialed, and reported in a level tone, "Night disturbance, Big Sky Lodge, mile 337. Guest saw unknown male outside her unit, room 17. After she hung up, she reached under the counter and laid a baseball bat on the laminate. "Come on," she said. We stepped back into the night. We didn't use flashlights, didn't call out. A faint wind stirred the pines. Something wooden creaked, maybe the old signpost. When we reached my door, she edged forward and lifted the curtain with the tip of the bat. The window looked in on my disheveled bed and the microwave's green digits. Nothing else. Probably just a transient, she said, nodding toward the tree line. They camp in there sometimes. I told her about the door-to-door knocking. She gave a small shrug. Folks get weird at night. Red and blue lights washed the motel 10 minutes later. 2 Park County deputies stepped out. One took my statement in the lot while the other swept his flashlight along the corridor, then out across the gravel and into the trees. They checked my window for prints, only smudged dust, and walked the perimeter, beam catching a sagging dumpster and the black wall of pines. One deputy pushed into the woods, calling sheriff's office in widening arcs. The silence that followed each shout stretched. He came back shaking his head. "No tracks I can see," he said, but admitted the dry ground wouldn't hold much anyway. They promised extra passes by the property until dawn and told me to keep my chain latched. The clerk offered a different room nearer the office. I took it. Room 4 smelled less musty. I bolted both locks, wedged a chair under the knob, and lay fully dressed on top of the covers, staring at the ceiling. Each thump from the ice machine, each distant Jake brake on the highway made me jolt. Eventually, gray light seeped under the curtains. At 7:30, I stepped outside, squinting. In daylight, the woods beyond the lot looked ordinary, dusty needles, sun-bleached trunks, waist-high undergrowth. I still wouldn't step off the cracked asphalt. One of the deputies sat in his cruiser across the frontage road filling out paperwork, watching the motel. He gave me a wave. I went to the office for coffee. A younger man had replaced the night clerk and was refilling the urn. "Did your cameras pick up anything?" I asked. He opened a closet door. 4 monitors glowed on a shelf. 2 were black. The corridor feed showed rolling static. The parking lot camera displayed a grainy shot of my Civic with its hood still up where the tow had left it. Only the office view was clear, showing us at the counter with a slight delay. "System's been acting up," he said. Rusty called at 9. The new alternator was in. Tyler came to fetch me. As the truck pulled away, I looked back through the rear window. The Big Sky Lodge shrank in the shimmering heat, its crooked sign blinking on and off. Relief hit me like a wave, but it ebbed as soon as Rusty's shop faded from my mirrors later that day, and I faced another stretch of empty interstate. That night in a bright chain hotel room in Coeur d'Alene, I finally searched Livingston News. Nothing about prowlers or arrests. Message boards mentioned homeless camps, some petty thefts, and a backpacker missing 2 summers ago. I told myself the man was just a vagrant looking for an unlocked door. Still, I kept replaying the measured way the knocks moved from room to room. The patience, like he was taking inventory. 6 weeks later, a padded envelope arrived at my place in Minneapolis. Inside was my spiral notebook, mailed back by Rusty. He'd found it under a seat. The entry for July 12 was slashed by a thick diagonal score, ink dragged into a dried, rust-colored smear. Like someone had run a wet thumb across fresh lines. I closed the notebook and slid it into a desk drawer. I haven't opened it since. But on nights when sleep won't come, I swear I hear that same polite knocking somewhere behind the walls, moving along a corridor that doesn't exist, pausing at doors I can't deadbolt. I've passed Livingston twice since. Both times I filled up 3 exits early and kept my eyes fixed on the highway signs, refusing to glance south. Maybe the neon has been fixed, every letter blazing. Maybe the building is condemned, trees inching over cracked pavement. I don't want to know. I just know the gap between my ear and any door or window. I count it like a pulse whenever night settles over an unfamiliar room. I was supposed to spend 1 night in St. Louis, just a layover between an insurance adjusters conference in Phoenix and a claim investigation in Pittsburgh. On March 17, 2025, a line of spring storms knocked out half the eastbound departures at Lambert International. After 9 hours of delays, the airline handed me a plastic meal voucher and a room coupon for the Meridian Grand, a 16-story brick tower a few blocks north of the Gateway Arch. It was close, cheap for the airline, and had vacancies at midnight. That was all I wanted. The shuttle dropped me on Washington Avenue at 12:47 a.m. neon, from still open bars smeared across the wet pavement. The Meridian's revolving door squealed like a carnival ride in need of grease. Inside, the lobby smelled of lemon polish and radiator steam. Marble floors showed through where rugs had worn thin. A lone front desk clerk, H. Crestwood, according to his badge, checked me in with the weary warmth of a man midway through a graveyard shift. "Room 814, he said, sliding the keycard in its sleeve. "Corner double. Your neighbor on the east just checked out, so it should be quiet." I signed and rolled my carry-on to the elevator. The car rattled up the shaft like a freight cage. Old hotels hum, their pipes, transformers, and the ghosts of big band music no one's played in decades. On 8, the hallway lights were soft yellow. Brass numbers on each door glowed dimly, as if backlit. Room 814 sat across from a fire door stenciled "No access, alarm will sound." My room was halfway modernized. Fresh paint, but a scarred writing desk. A flat screen bolted above a mantel that once held a fat tube TV. The rain-fogged windows rattled in their frames. I kicked off my shoes, emptied the courtesy water bottle, and called my wife, Megan, 2 time zones away. She answered groggy, reminded me to set 2 alarms, and drifted off mid-sentence. I smiled, plugged in my phone, and killed the lights. The storm had moved east. Only distant thunder rolled like trucks over a bridge. At 2:11 a.m., I remember the digits clearly. I woke to a sound that didn't belong to pipes or transformers. Someone was sobbing. Not the sniffling you hear from a sad movie through paper walls, but deep, shaking, full-body weeping. Ragged breaths, hitching pauses. It bled through the wall at the head of my bed, the one shared with room 816. The voice was clearly female, somewhere between young and middle-aged. Words came in gasps I couldn't make out, then more long, raw cries. I lay there staring at the dim ceiling fixture. My first reaction was simple sympathy. People fall apart in hotel rooms all the time, after bad phone calls, funerals, affairs, failed deals. After a couple of minutes, I swung my legs out, pulled on my jeans, and rapped lightly on my side of the wall. More a question than a warning. The sobbing paused as if the woman were listening. Then it came back louder. Panic rode under it now. I picked up the room phone and hit front desk. "Meridian Grand, this is Henry. Sorry to bother you," I said, "but someone in 816 sounds like they might need help. She's been crying hard for a few minutes." A short pause. I pictured him checking a screen. "Sir, 816 shows OOS," he said. "Out of service for deep clean. Housekeeping stripped it 3 days ago. It's locked and unoccupied." "She's in there right now," I said, "or someone is. I'll send security up, but the master board shows empty." The sobbing stopped mid-breath like someone had pressed mute. I stood there, receiver warm against my ear, hearing only my own heart. "I guess she heard me," I managed. "Maybe it's coming from the other side. 818. "That's 818, yes. Registered to a Mr. Davidson. Checked in alone at 10. Another pause. "Security will check the floor," Henry said. I thanked him and hung up. The wall was silent. Air handler hiss. Faraway elevator ding. No more cries. 5 minutes. 10. A keycard beeped up the hallway, the guard probably. My adrenaline slowly faded. I slid back under the blanket, fully dressed, and watched faint shadows shift above me until sleep dragged me under. Sun woke me. Actual sunlight through the thin city curtains. My phone read 7:52. I rolled out of bed, stiff in my jeans, and stumbled into the bathroom. Red half-moons hung under my eyes in the mirror. As I reached for the hand towel, a single sharp metallic clank echoed through the pipes, like a radiator below had been jolted. Then silence. I checked out around 8:30. Henry was gone. A day supervisor typed at the terminal. Behind her, through an arch, I saw 2 uniformed officers speaking with a man in an orange maintenance shirt. Yellow tape stretched across the entrance to the breakfast lounge and sagged across the hallway to the elevators. "Rough morning?" I asked. "We're sorting a records issue," she said carefully. "May I print your receipt?" One of the officers, a tall woman with shaver on her name tag, noticed us. She glanced at the screen, then at my keycard sleeve in the supervisor's hand. "Sir, were you in 814 last night?" she asked. My mouth went dry. "Yes." "I'll need a brief statement," she said. Calm voice, sharp eyes. She led me to a corner near a closed bar. Her partner joined us with a notebook. They introduced themselves from St. Louis Metro PD, homicide. The word landed heavily. "Did you see or hear anything unusual overnight?" Shaver asked. I told them about the crying through the wall, my call downstairs, the abrupt silence. Just the facts, no mention of how the sound had burrowed under my skin. "Approximate time?" the male officer asked. "I woke at 2:11, so between 2:10 and 2:15. He jotted it down. "That fits our preliminary window," Shaver said. "Thank you. Window for what?" I asked. She exhaled. "Room 816 should have remained sealed after March 14. A deceased female was found concealed under the mattress there. Crime scene processed. Somehow the lockout flag got removed in the system. Housekeeping never went back, and no one else was assigned to that room." My stomach flipped. "This morning maintenance reported a strong odor. A recheck turned up additional evidence missed in the first sweep," she continued. "Your report that someone was in there crying lines up with security footage. There was secondary activity overnight. Someone went back in." "You think the killer came back?" I asked. "That's one possibility," she said. "Or a witness who didn't know about the homicide. Either way, your call helps us narrow the timeline. We'll be pulling card logs and cameras." She took my card and contact info in case detectives needed more. Then she stepped back onto the tape. Guests with conference badges whispered by the coffee urn. A bellhop hovered, eyes flicking between the cops and the elevators. I rolled my bag outside. March wind whipped around corners, making flags snap. Sun lit the arch and the glass of Busch Stadium. Commuters streamed past, oblivious to the taped-off entrance half a block away. Cities don't stop for private nightmares. I walked toward the river, needing distance from the lobby. I ducked into a bakery that smelled of cinnamon and yeast, bought coffee I barely tasted, and watched local news scroll across a TV. Politics, sports, no mention of the Meridian. Official statements take time. My mind replayed the sobs, the way they stopped the moment I involved someone else. If the killer had been in there and heard me, maybe my call scared him into leaving early, leaving evidence. Or maybe the sound had been something else, audio stuck on a loop from a smashed phone, an accomplice mourning what they'd done. Nothing fit perfectly. At the Metrolink station, a tourist asked which platform went to the airport. I answered on autopilot while still turning those questions over. Whose cries are we willing to believe? On the flight over Indiana, I opened my laptop and stared at spreadsheets I couldn't see. I pulled up a blank email to Megan instead and described everything. The rain-streaked windows, brass numbers, the cadence of the weeping. It felt like pressing a thumb into a bruise, hurting on purpose, necessary. I ended with a promise I hadn't made to the police. If they needed me back in St. Louis to testify, I would go. That voice had pushed through wallpaper and disbelief. I owed it more than a line in a log. April came in cold and bright. On the 12th, Detective Sharon Gwynn, new name, same case, called my office. Video had caught a man in maintenance coveralls entering 816 at 1:59 a.m. and leaving at 2:06, cap hiding his face. He matched a suspect wanted in 2 other motel homicides in Illinois. They had prints and motive, but wanted confirmation that the sound on a hallway mic was the same crying I'd heard. I agreed. They sent an audio file through a secure link. I borrowed a small conference room, shut the blinds, and hit play. At first there was only HVAC hiss. Then faint but recognizable, the sobbing. Softer than through the shared wall, but the same pattern. 3 uneven breaths, a caught inhale, a low, broken syllable. I typed positive identification and sent it back. A month later, headlines named the suspect. Gerald Jerry Major, 39, former sheet metal installer. According to the prosecutor, He'd use stolen contractor uniforms to slip into staff areas, hid victims under mattresses, and returned days later to the scenes. Sometimes to harm himself, sometimes to relive, always to weep. His visits were brief, but old buildings carry sound in strange ways. And one night, a jet-lagged stranger woke up at just the right minute. I read the article twice, then stepped outside the office. May sun warmed my face. The air smelled of cut grass and distant dust riding the upper air currents. Kids shouted in a park. Dogs barked. Somewhere a siren rose and fell. Ordinary noise but alive. Somewhere a window slammed. Elsewhere a screen door creaked. People kept talking, laughing, grieving, breathing. Proof that once a voice is heard, it's harder to bury it. I'm writing this on March 17, 2026 in a business hotel outside Redding, California. Here the walls are concrete block. Still, before I sleep, I mute the TV, set my phone down and just listen. Most nights, it's ice machines and distant elevators. Once in a while, a muffled argument or a laugh from the next room. And every time, I remember those sobs in 814. I remind myself that sometimes the simplest act in the dark is believing a sound is real and dialing the front desk.